All right, welcome. Today we're diving into a really provocative and, let's be honest, pretty controversial work, Robert Greene's The Art of Seduction. Now, we're going to move way beyond just romance here. We're going to explore how the deep psychological principles in this book show up everywhere, from politics to the ads you see every day. We'll uncover how these timeless strategies of influence are shaping our world, a lot of the time without us even realizing it.
So let's start with this question right here. What if the most powerful kind of influence is the kind you don't even see coming? It's a huge question, right? Because it really challenges this idea we all have that we're these totally rational people, fully in control of every choice we make. We're going to reframe seduction, not as some kind of dating guide, but as this really sophisticated, often invisible, form of psychological persuasion, the kind that quietly shapes our relationships, what we buy, and yeah, even who we vote for.
So what's at the heart of Greene's book? Well, his main argument is that seduction is really just a subtle game of power and psychology. It's a whole process, and it's designed to slip right past our logical, rational defenses by aiming directly at our deepest desires and our biggest insecurities. I've got to be clear, this is not about love. Think of it more as a manual, a breakdown of the mechanics of charm, persuasion, and, emotional control. So to really get this, let's start by defining what seduction actually is.
Okay, so what exactly is seduction, according to Greene? Well, the first thing we absolutely have to do is break the word away from its usual romantic meaning. Yeah, it can apply to romance for sure, but its real scope is so much bigger. You can be seduced by an idea, a lifestyle, a whole political movement, or just a really charismatic leader. It's a process, not just a one-time thing.
The way Greene puts it, it's basically like falling under a spell. Think about it. Your mind is usually like this fortress, right? It's filled with your own worries, your to-do lists, all that internal chatter. Seduction is all about finding a tiny crack in those walls. And the key to doing that? Focused attention. It's about making someone feel like they are the only person in the world, like they're truly seen and understood. That intense focus creates this kind of emotional gravity, It just pulls their thoughts away from their own stuff and over to you, until, pretty soon, you're all they can think about.
And that quote gets right to the heart of it. That last word there, surrender. That's the whole game. This isn't about winning an argument with logic or facts. Nope. It's about creating a particular emotional state. This mix of pleasure, confusion, and deep curiosity where a person's natural resistance just dissolves. The whole point is to get them to willingly give in to your influence, not because you've convinced them with a spreadsheet, but because they're totally captivated by the feeling you've created.
This table really lays out the core difference, doesn't it? Being direct and honest, that's like putting all your cards on the table. Everyone sees everything. But seduction, that's a game played in the shadows. It works indirectly, with little hints, a bit of mystery, and a whole lot of allure. It's not trying to argue that its version of reality is better than yours. Instead, it creates this brand new, intoxicating fantasy world that makes your regular, day-to-day life seem, kind of boring and gray.
Okay, so the big question is, why does this stuff work so well? Greene's core idea is that every single one of us, no exceptions, is vulnerable to this. And look, that's not some weakness you should be ashamed of. It's just a fundamental part of being human. We like to think we're these logical, self-contained beings, but the truth is we're all walking around just filled with insecurities, deep longings, and needs that haven't been met.
And these right here, these are the entry points. Think about it. We all crave that feeling of validation, right? That attention that makes us feel special and confirms the best version of ourselves we have in our heads. We all have these empty spaces inside us, maybe from childhood, maybe from disappointments later in life. And we're just unconsciously pulled toward people who seem like they can fill those voids. And maybe the most powerful one of all, we all just want to escape the boredom of everyday life sometimes. A master of influence doesn't invent these feelings in you. They just know how to spot them and, use them.
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly explains our biggest vulnerability. Every single one of us has this gap between who we really are, flawed, a little insecure, maybe even petty sometimes, and the idealized person we want to be. A seducer lives and breathes in that gap. They don't talk to the real you, they talk to the fantasy you. They reflect that perfect angelic version of yourself right back at you. And trying to resist that, it's almost impossible, because man, does it feel good.
All right, so now that we get why we're vulnerable, let's look at how it's done. Greene breaks down the strategies into these key archetypes. Now, it's really important to think of these less as fixed personality types and more like masks, roles that people put on, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not, to influence others. These are patterns of behavior that have worked for thousands of years because they tap into our most basic, primal desires.
So here are just a few of the main ones Greene talks about. Each one is a master of a very specific kind of psychological pull, and each one targets a completely different core human fantasy. Let's dive into a few of these so you can really see the different shapes this kind of influence can take. First up, the siren. The siren works on a totally sensory level. Their power is all about creating a spectacle, something so visually overwhelming that it just shuts down your rational brain. The textbook example, of course, is Cleopatra. Picture this. She's going to meet Mark Antony. Does she just show up? No. She arrives at twilight on this incredible barge with purple sails. She's dressed as Venus, the goddess of love, surrounded by attendants, and the air is thick with perfume. The goal was pure sensory overload. Create an atmosphere so dazzling, so dreamlike, that your target's mind is completely disarmed before you even start talking business.
Then you've got the rake. The rake taps into that part of us that secretly wants something a little forbidden, something a little dangerous. They have this aura of thrill about them, and they basically give people permission to explore the desires they usually keep locked up. A great example was the Duc de Richelieu back in the 18th century. The guy's reputation was an absolute scandal, but his boldness, the way he used language, it made him totally irresistible, especially in the super stiff and formal French court. He was the ultimate escape from all that boring propriety.
Now, the ideal lover. This might be the most powerful archetype of all, especially when you're talking about a huge audience. Why? Because they don't push their own personality on you. Instead, they become a perfect mirror for your ideals. John F. Kennedy was an absolute master of this. He wasn't just running for president, he was selling America a fantasy of itself. All that talk of the new frontier, that whole Camelot vibe, it tapped right into this deep national desire for youth, energy, and a sense of purpose. He literally became the living embodiment of the country's best image of itself.
And finally, the charmer. The charmer's power is a lot quieter, but believe me, it's just as strong. Their entire method is making you feel like you're the center of the universe. It's all about intense, focused listening and just making you feel validated. The story of Benjamin Disraeli and Queen Victoria is perfect here. After her husband died, the queen was lonely, isolated, and felt like nobody took her seriously. Disraeli didn't just shower her with cheap compliments. No, he listened to her. He made her feel deeply understood. He reflected her own intelligence back at her. By making it all about her, he earned her complete and total trust. And with that came an incredible amount of political power.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about one of the most powerful and honestly kind of counterintuitive tactics in this whole playbook, the strategic use of absence. Think about it. We live in a world where everyone is available 24/7. So in that environment, creating a little mystery by pulling back, that is a serious power move.
Even the ancient Roman poet Ovid knew what was up. He understood this weird paradox of human desire. If you're always around, people get used to you. It's predictable, it's familiar, and eventually, it's boring. There's just no room left for the imagination to do its work. So what Greene argues is that it's the calculated absence, that strategic hot and cold thing, that really gets the flames of obsession going.
And here's the psychology behind why it works. When you're not physically there, you actually become more present in their mind. They start replaying your conversations, overthinking everything you did, and they fill in all the blank spaces with their own perfect fantasies. In a way, they're basically doing the work of seduction on themselves. And that fantasy version of you, it becomes way more powerful, way more perfect than the real you ever could be, and that's what they get hooked on.
Okay, this brings us to something really critical that we have to talk about. All of these tactics, they're incredibly powerful. I mean, they tap right into the core of how our brains are wired. And that forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. Where's the line between influence and just ugly, harmful manipulation?
So when does this stop being a game and start being just a cruel power trip? You know, it's really important to get that the book itself doesn't take a moral stance. It's amoral. It just presents these strategies as tools. Think of it like a scalpel. A surgeon can use it to save a life, but someone else could use it to cause harm. So the morality, the ethics of it, that comes down entirely to the person using the tool, their intention, and maybe most importantly, the actual effect it has on the other person. So really, the difference is all in the outcome. Seductive influence, at its best, creates this shared feeling of pleasure, a temporary escape. It's a game that, on some level, both people agree to play. But harmful manipulation, That's a totally one-sided power trip. It's designed to create anxiety, self-doubt, and dependency. It doesn't just lower your defenses for a little while. It tries to tear them down completely, just for selfish gain, leaving you weaker in the end.
Now, it's easy to look at all these historical examples and think, okay, that was then. But the psychological principles behind them are totally timeless. You could even argue they're more powerful and more widespread than ever before, thanks to the digital age. Yeah, the tools have changed. We've gone from royal courts to TikTok feeds, but the human vulnerabilities they target, those are exactly the same.
I mean, just look at social media. Let's really dig into that one for a second. An influencer's perfectly curated feed is basically a masterclass in the ideal lover archetype. They show you a life with all the boring parts and all the flaws edited out, and it perfectly mirrors the escapist fantasies of their followers. They build these parasocial relationships that feel real, that create a sense of intimacy and connection. And that's how they seduce their audience into loyalty, admiration, and, let's be real, buying stuff. The psychology is the exact same as what JFK used. The only difference is the scale.
Okay, so we've been through the mechanics of how this all works. Now we get to the most important part, the most empowering part of knowing all this. How do you actually spot these patterns in your own life? How do you push back against influence you don't want? How do you build up your own psychological armor?
What's really interesting here is that the first line of defense isn't about being suspicious of everyone else. That just leads to paranoia. No, it all starts with an honest, and yet sometimes difficult, look at yourself. The best defense isn't building higher walls around you. It's knowing the layout of your own inner fortress.
So you have to ask yourself, what's your type? I don't just mean in romance. What are the ideals or qualities you're just drawn to without even thinking? What are the unmet needs that make you vulnerable? What's the fantasy you secretly wish for? Is it adventure, total security, being seen as brilliant, or just feeling truly deeply understood? Once you identify what you feel is missing, you basically install an internal alarm system. You become way more aware the moment a person, or a brand, or political idea starts reflecting that exact fantasy right back at you.
And here's the ultimate reality check. You have to learn to see through the mask. For just a second, ignore all the charming words and the big, flashy gestures, and just look at the data. And the data is this. How does this person's influence actually make you feel over time? Do you feel stronger, more independent, more confident in yourself? Or do you find yourself feeling more anxious, more insecure, and constantly needing their approval? That feeling, right there, that's the most reliable clue you have to what their real intentions are.
So, when we get to the end of all this, it's really important to understand that learning about the art of seduction isn't about getting a playbook to dominate other people or become some kind of master manipulator. If you see it that way, you're honestly missing the entire point. It's a really shallow way to look at it, and it's not going to end well.
Really, what this is all about is understanding the psychological forces that are always at play whenever people interact. This knowledge is a tool for awareness. It's like developing a kind of psychological literacy. It lets you see the subtle games of power and influence that are happening all around you all the time. And once you can see the game, you get to make a conscious choice. Do I want to play? And if the answer is yes, you can play on your own terms, guided by what you actually believe in. So, as we wrap up our look into this, let's boil down this really complex and, let's face it, sometimes unsettling book to its single most important and empowering idea.
That's it, right there. The most powerful defense is simply awareness. It's not about being cynical or putting up walls around your heart. It's just being aware. It's about being able to recognize the patterns of influence at your job, in your relationships, in the media you watch every day. That awareness is your ultimate shield against manipulation you don't want, and it's the very first step toward having real control over your own life.
And so, that's the question I want to leave you with. Where might this kind of influence be shaping your choices right now, without you even realizing it? From the brands you feel this weird loyalty to the public figures you look up to the dynamics playing out in your own personal life. Just take a second to think about the subtle and often invisible arts of seduction that are working all around you all the time.